Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and this is my co-host.
I'm Chris Huddleston.
And today we are going to be talking about the 1981 movie Sylvester Stallone in Nighthawks.
Is this trip business or pleasure?
Pleasure, I hope.
Welcome to the United States.
Hamer Reinhardt, sometimes called Wolfgar. Born Frankfurt, Germany, 1946. Educated Paris and Patrice Lumumba University, Moscow. Currently self-employed. Occupation, international terrorist.
You are to be indoctrinated in counter-terrorist techniques.
Deke da Silva, age 35. Born and raised New York City. Honorable discharge, U.S. Army, 1972. 52 registered kills. Occupation, cop. One man can bring the world to its knees. And only one man can stop him. Universal Pictures presents Sylvester Stallone in Nighthawks.
Okay, well, that was a very visual trailer, of course, as trailers are wont to be, but I think you get a sense of the tone from it. Let's just jump right in. Chris, what did you think of this film?
I liked it. So
synopsis. Why don't we start with the synopsis and then
Sure.
Sorry about that.
So Sylvester Stallone and Billy D. Williams are undercover detectives. They're partners, and they get reassigned to this anti-terrorist task force that this guy from England has come in to run. And there have been a series of bombings in Europe done by this international terrorist played by Rutger Hauer. And they predict the Interpol computers, which they have this large room of computers, which is pretty funny, but predicts that he's going to strike next in New York. And of course he does. And Stallone and Billy D. Williams are basically the guys who have to bring him down. That's pretty much the gist of the plot.
Absolutely. Okay, now back to your thoughts.
So I liked this quite a bit. I had never seen this movie. I had been aware of this ever since I remember seeing this played on HBO when I was a kid. And it was one of those funny things where when you're a child and you start to kind of become aware of the actors that you know being other characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I loved the Rocky movies as a kid. And I remember seeing this advertised on HBO and it was like, oh, this is Rocky, but he's a cop, weird. And, but it was rated R. So I figured my parents didn't let me watch it or whatever. So I had never seen it. And then there's a movie that was released later in the 80s called Terror in the Isles. That's just it's just clips from basically horror movies. Have you ever seen it before?
No.
It's a pretty neat movie. It's narrated by Donald Pleasance, and it's basically like he's in a movie theater and he's talking about what scares people and everything. And there's clips from, I think, Psycho and Halloween and things like that. But for whatever reason, it has clips from this, which this isn't a horror movie in any way. Huh. But I remember seeing that, and they show a couple of good scenes from this. And it was just kind of always one of those movies that had sort of been in the back of my mind. And then it popped up on Netflix. It's actually on Netflix until August the 1st. I don't know why it's leaving then, but I thought, hey, this is one, that we should watch. But overall, I enjoyed this. It's we can get into this more, but it's interesting to watch Stallone early in his career.
Yeah.
Because he later became kind of a cartoon character, and he got lumped in with, that whole wave of 80s action stars. And he kind of got lumped in with, of course, with Arnold, but also the guys like Van Damme and Steven Seagal, which I always think he was several notches above those kind of lesser guys, because for one thing, this movie shows you, hey, he could really act. And I watched First Blood right before the quarantine happened. My brother-in-law had never seen it before, and I was like, oh, we should watch that. And I don't know how long it's been since you've seen that, but he puts in a really good performance in that. So, like I say, this is a very subtle performance for him. His act, he does a good job. Billy D. Williams is really good in this. They have a good, rapport or connection or whatever. It's kind of the buddy cop thing.
Yeah.
Rutger Hauer is very good in this. I think this was his first American movie. Everything he had done prior to this was Dutch, and he worked with Paul Verhoeven of RoboCop fame, I think, on a couple of movies prior to this. So, there are some tropes in here that you've seen over and over and over again. There's a couple of tropes that they kind of turn on their head. It's not an amazing movie. It's kind of one of those rare films that when I saw the runtime, it's just over 90 minutes. And I thought, oh, this is, 90 minutes is about perfect for a movie.
Yeah, I actually wanted to sort of recommend that, being like, if you're into, check it out. It's not a big ask.
No.
Dune, I forgot how long Dune was, which we did last time, but this is not that. This is an easy hour and a half. If it doesn't have you're not going to feel guilty about turning it off. But I think it gets its hooks in you. I think you want to keep watching. There are a couple of great scenes in it that I thought, well, this is really great. So I agree that the runtime is an added appeal.
Though what I was going to say is it was kind of one of those rare movies that I thought it could have been maybe like had an extra 10 or 15 minutes, because some of it seemed kind of rushed. And looking it up on IMDb, there are 2 directors listed and one is uncredited. So I kind of wonder if this was a, kind of a troubled production. And
that would explain a lot, because my criticisms of the film are that it's a little uneven. It's a lot uneven. And a little all over the place. There are some scenes where you feel like Stallone and Billy D. Williams are improvising some stuff, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that in concept. It just feels like there's this sort of subtext. There's one that they're okay. I got to zoom out for 1 second. So they have a kind of a sting thing they do. They're plainclothes cops, and Stallone dresses up as a woman frequently with a mask.
Now, so let me interrupt you for just, I don't want to mean to interrupt you. Did you spot that immediately in the beginning that was
no, because it's so silly. I'm like, surely not. And then,
but I thought either this woman has a lot of makeup on, because it looked like a mask to me. So I thought either she has a ton of makeup on, or this is somebody dressed up as a woman. I kind of spotted that right away, that was a sting thing, but that was pretty funny.
Well, just the cartoon. I mean, it's very Wile E. Coyote. It's just Bugs Bunny stuff. But he's in a full dress, and am I misremembering heels? I feel like
might have been.
And of course, what they're doing with the character design is it's a Serpico knockoff. He's got the shoulder length hair, he's got the beard, which you're not used to seeing on Stallone. But I mean, it's very clearly a Serpico look. So when this woman reaches up and sort of pulls off her face and wig, and underneath is this woolly bearded Stallone, it's a laugh. It's not supposed to be a funny movie moment in the film, but so they've got this thing going where they he dresses up and he's the bait, and some bad guys come out to victimize this poor woman. And they're down. This is all getting around to the improvised scene I was thinking of. So they're down. They're doing their bit, and some cops pull up, and it turns out they're there to say, "Hey, you're wanted downtown," for what turns out to be this international task force. But it scares off their perps. And as they're leaving the thing, Billy D. Williams wads up the slip or whatever that says, the summons, and throws it on the ground. And there's this exchange of like, "Oh, you're littering. Don't litter." Right. And if you watch it, go back and watch that scene for a second. It's like they're sort of thinking like, should I pick it up or do we keep walking or what? I guess we keep walking. It made me think whoever is directing this, knowing that there's two directors makes a lot of sense, but it just felt like there wasn't a single real strong, clear vision of what this movie was, and scene by scene, what the tone was supposed to be, the goal of each scene. And the actors, all three of them, seem not, Rutger Hauer is great, and he's naturally, he's got a natural ease on screen. The camera loves him. I just felt there was no director pushing him. He can play the kind of charming, and you just get the sense like he learned his lines, and he made some choices, and he showed up, and he sort of did his thing with a smile, and and it was fine. It was probably the most compelling part of the movie, but it's far from the best work that Rutger Hauer's ever done. And I thought, well, that's the director, man. You got to say that was great. Now I want another take where you double the stakes, right? Or now I want yet another take, where this is the key moment that it's driving to, you know what I mean? It just felt like nobody was riding these guys.
And, a couple of things that were, where I said, I think it could have used a little more time in the beginning. They do a couple of stings, and it seems like they do a fine job with it, but it's like all the other cops hate them, and the chief or whatever doesn't like them. He doesn't like what they're doing and wants to move them to this other thing, but you don't really get any indication as to why. And also with Rutger Hauer, there's very little about why he's doing what he's doing. I mean, he gives a speech late in the movie about that he's representing repressed people or whatever, but you don't know. I mean, that trailer gives more backstory than what the movie gives you almost.
Well, and when he talks about it in the movie, it's like he's going to lose his job prospects. Right. When he's talking, there's a female assassin or terrorist as well, and that is sort of his only other cohort that we see stateside. And in his conversations with her, I don't even remember the names. It's like, oh, well, he won't believe his eye. It's always like he's trying to land a gig. He doesn't want to blow future job prospects by getting burned on this one, unless he does make a sort of a speech about, the oppressed. Blah, blah, blah. It all comes off as baloney. You don't believe somebody who is there has some kind of a cause or something. They don't look at that like a job. You know what I mean? That was a little. I don't think there's a whole lot of terrorists that it's like, oh, this is my job. I don't really like blowing. He says at one point, I don't like killing people. It's just my job. But it's like, I don't like, blowing up things and stuff, but it's just what I do for a living. You got to make a living. I don't know. That was kind of weird. Yeah. I wonder, I wanted to get your thoughts on this too. I thought to myself when I was watching in 1981, is this because of course we see psychopaths all over the screen nowadays, and particularly after Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
That was so resonant a performance that you've seen many imitators of, like, and all the way down to true crime shows about the worst serial killers of all time and whatever. But I wondered, in 81, this idea of a utterly remorseless, charming, manipulative, highly intelligent, organized psychopath who says he doesn't like killing, and doesn't in the performance doesn't seem to do it for the pleasure of it. But doesn't seem negatively affected, doesn't pause at doing it either. I wondered, is this one of the early depictions? I felt like this movie was supposed to be the very concept of a character like Rutger Hauer's was supposed to strike terror into the viewer. Like, oh my God, this guy's, there's no code. He just sets off a bomb, or he'll just, if somebody discovers his case of guns, he'll just kill him. Like, who could do such a thing? You know what I mean? And of course now it seems pretty tame, actually. Like, he's sort of polite. He kills them. He doesn't torture them to death. He just shoots them.
He lets a baby go at one point, because he doesn't want to kill the baby. Now he's more concerned with what the media would say about that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to kill a baby,
Well, and he does it he demands that the Stallone character be the one to come and get the baby. So he wants a face-to-face with Stallone more than anything.
Yeah.
To toy with him.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, that was something that I was thinking just kind of in general watching this movie. So I don't want to, the ending of this has a good ending. I thought, I don't want to give that away, but it kind of sets Stallone has an ex-wife who he's trying to rekindle their relationship. And so there's a very common trope with, the love interest being in danger that they set up, and they do something different with it than what you're expecting. Right. But, I was thinking a lot of these things we've seen so many times. Another thing that is a trope that they did a little bit differently than what I expected. Early on, I thought, okay, this, because it's New York City, and it's, New York City in the early 80s. So it's really terrible, and that became a trope in 80s action movies, in particular, that, they almost present the United States, and especially cities like New York, as like something out of Mad Max, and it's just, there's all these criminals on the street. And I thought it was going to be the thing of Stallone and Billy D. Williams are going to be these guys that, the system is full of these bleeding hearts that just want to let the criminals go, but they've got to work outside of the system, and they're going to kill them, and all that kind of stuff, which it turns out not to be really that at all. I mean, they're trying to put these guys away, but Stallone is very adamant about that. He doesn't want to kill anybody because he had, what did it say? He had 52 confirmed kills in Vietnam or whatever.
Yeah.
So he's really not at all the dirty Harry kind of guy that it's just like, I'm just going to clean up, or even what, a character like Cobra or something like that Stallone became later, that it's like, the man is keeping me from killing these guys. He wasn't like that at all. He was basically
the conscience. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But we've seen some of these tropes so many times that you kind of wonder where they started. Like, with what you were saying about Rutger Hauer, was this one of the first movies to have kind of that almost like a Hannibal Lecter kind of a character? I don't know.
Well, terrorism wasn't new,
Right.
I remember, I'm embarrassed now that I'm going to mess up the title of this. Is it 3 Days of the Condor? Yeah.
We watched that as kids at your house. I can remember that.
So that's with the OAS and the assassin that is trying to assassinate de Gaulle. Great movie.
Oh, awesome movie.
Fantastic. And the idea of assassins and terrorists aren't new to cinema, of course. But, in a post 9/11 world, the idea of terrorism on American soil is not novel. And certainly, I was just watching the Tom Clancy series with what's his face on Amazon, which is fine. It's entertaining. I like him. John Krasinski.
The guy. Yeah.
But it's all about chasing down terrorists. Like, it's a thing now. But it wasn't really a thing prior to 9/11, right? So we're like, oh gosh, another bomb. And the IRA set off a bomb, and it's horrible. But the thought of it happening in America just felt like, well, it's not America, right? And this is well before that time. So I think that was supposed to be part of the was the idea of making American terrorism and a terrorist in America real. And just the concept of it was supposed to be terrifying, which I think looking at it, from back with this reverse time lens, it feels kind of quaint almost. But just to jump back also to what you were talking about is New York in that time period. I don't feel like this movie goes out of its way to depict New York as a particularly dangerous or crime-ridden place, as much as it sort of seems to just accept that as the, like these predators are out at night, and that's what it is. And that's why the streets are pretty much empty. There's no one walking around.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, and living in New York City, there's people walking around, well, a little less with the pandemic going on, but, there's people walking around any time of night. You go out at 3:30 a.m., you're not going to see too many people. But my point is, then it seemed to be like, oh, this lone woman that turns out to be Stallone walking down the street. I don't know exactly where I'm going. I'm suddenly afraid I'm going to get into fragile territory here. But the tone of the movie seems to imply not that New York, crawling with evil. It's more just like, yeah, it's a tough city. There's a lot of crime. You don't go out at night. Thank God we got a couple of Nighthawks like this out there trying to clean up the streets. And it's not a thesis of the movie, but there's the title. Right? Like, what Nighthawks? Oh, it's these two. Which I feel like you leave it behind early in the movie, and it becomes about this terrorist.
Yeah, that tone kind of changed. Like I said, I thought it was going to be the typical 80s thing where it's just like all this, and they kind of got away from that. Like you said, with once they switched over to being on the terrorist task force. I did think it was funny in the scene so the scene that you referenced earlier, where they are doing their sting and the other just regular like street cop guys in their patrol car come up and screw it up. And then, Stallone and Billy D. Williams are mad at them. It was funny because what they had done was it was in Central Park.
Right.
And Stallone was dressed up as a businessman with a briefcase. And he goes and walks under a bridge through a tunnel, and there are just these 3 or 4 guys. It's broad daylight,
right?
And they're just these 3 or 4 guys waiting, just
right.
And it's like
pigeons perched on they're just looking for someone to jump.
Was New York City? I mean, I know it was worse, then than it is now. Was there ever a time that it was like that? That
right.
like you couldn't walk through Central Park in broad daylight without being attacked?
And these guys, it's not subtle either. It's not. It'd be funny enough if they just came out of nowhere, but you're right. It's like they went to central casting and like, we need 3 goons.
Yeah.
They line these guys up on the bridge. It's just people walking behind them, and they're just like waiting.
Yeah.
Hey, let's wait here until a lone businessman.
That's when we
see the tunnel.
Yeah, the businessmen just walk through here, every day or whatever. But like I was saying before, did you really understand why they were, they have the kind of standard scene that is in every buddy cop action movie where they're yelling at the chief or whatever because he's pissed off at them or whatever. Did you ever really understand what it seemed like? They were good at their jobs. It didn't seem like, was it just the other people were jealous of them or what? I didn't quite really understand. I just don't think that was fleshed out enough.
It just kind of all falls into the bin of this movie was all over the place for me. Like I could sort of see what was going on the, somebody wrote it, right? So on the page, somebody was driving for something. But then I think that got muddy in the execution. And I'll also say about Billy D. Williams and Sylvester Stallone's performances, they're very over the top. Like it's very, very big. And they have intimate scenes where they're like talking about Stallone's reluctance to be a part of this anti-terrorist task force. And these guys are partners. And he's like, listen, man, this is your decision, but you're the best. And if you're not, city needs you. Like, what are you doing? That you're going to walk away? And it's just terrible. It's just, it's just hammy. And I'm like, where's the director here? Like, somebody's got to rein these actors in and be like, okay, half as big, more like, why are you saying this to him? What do you, dial it in, focus. Because obviously both men are capable of good performances. And I think their performances could have been a lot better here. Rocky wasn't so far away. I think he was trying to paint himself as a movie star or a great actor that could do a bunch of different stuff. And where he ended up, Stallone, as much as it's fun to make fun of him and the way that he speaks, a smart guy. Like, Rocky's a brilliant movie, and as a producer, like, he's always been very savvy, and he's made a ton of money at it. And I think he ended up into the popcorn movies and Rambo, and he's like, oh, that's what is going to sell a ton of tickets and what'll be a great vehicle for me. And he did that for pretty much the rest of his career.
And, he wrote and directed and acted in a lot of the movies that he did. I think, almost aside from the movie itself, I think one thing that's really interesting to me about this one is where these three actors were in their careers, because we have like you said, Stallone became what he became, but you also have Billy D. Williams and Rutger Hauer. So this was 81. So this was a year after The Empire Strikes Back. So, and a lot of this, this is just my own speculation. I don't have any proof to go on this, but I'm sure I looked Billy D's credits up on IMDb. His first credit was in 1959. I mean, he had to have been a kid, but he was in a ton of TV all through the 70s. And then, I kind of imagine that he thought, okay, The Empire Strikes Back, this is going to be the thing that launches me into, and he became very famous, but basically he was just typecast as Lando after that, Yeah. With Stallone, like you said, I'm sure I think both the first two Rocky movies had come out at this point, but this was the year before First Blood. So he hadn't done Rambo yet. So I'm sure he was already starting to feel typecast as Rocky,
Interesting.
And so, like I say, it wasn't until the next year that First Blood came out. And then also, like I said before, Rutger Hauer, I think this was probably his first American movie. So probably American audiences didn't know who he was. The next year for him was Blade Runner, which, didn't really do great at the time, but now that's an iconic role. So you basically have these three iconic guys who, it would be just a couple of years more before Stallone then is also not just Rocky, but he's Rambo.
Right. And Rocky did well in the box office.
They did.
Nobody,
Yeah, all of those did, but people knew who he was, but he was just it was probably just like, oh, it's that Rocky guy. So this movie,
just to remind everybody in case they aren't up on it, is the original Rocky. Forget Rocky 4, Rocky 5, and Rocky 6. The original Rocky was a drama. It was not a pulse quickening boxing movie where it was all flashing lights and thumping music and it's me versus Mr. T or me versus the Russian. It was a very, very almost plodding drama about this guy who just didn't have much else he was good at, and his claim to fame by the end of that movie was that he was able to go the distance against this much more famous, nobody expected this guy, Rocky, to be able to stand up the whole fight. And he just took a Herculean beating. But that was the triumph of the movie,
Yeah.
It's a heck of a film, but it is
And,
not,
written
it's
by
not an action
Stallone.
movie. Yeah,
you
not
know.
an action movie.
No, not at all. I mean, it's, won Best Picture, I believe.
So I think he was thought of as a dramatic actor.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting. So this one it only made like $19 million worldwide, which adjusted for inflation, that's about $50 million. Whereas the next year with First Blood, that made like 127 million or
Yeah.
something, it was a big hit. And then the next Rambo movie made $300 million, which is like 700 million today.
Yeah. Well,
So,
again,
but-
I feel like this was a Serpico. People are like, I don't know how involved he was in the production of this, the getting this made, but it feels like that slot. There's a lot of flags in here that just feel like they're making Serpico 10 years later.
right.
And they want to kind of cash in on that. People are like, oh, that looks good. Oh, Stallone. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Cop. Yeah. Rebel, New York cop. Right.
Yeah. But you just kind of wonder, if this had been made 5 or 10 years later with these three guys, kind of how different maybe it would have been received, because it seems like this just kind of fizzled because, again, I'm sure audiences is just kind of looked at it like, oh, it's Rocky and Lando and then some other guy that we don't know, But the funny thing is, this was another thing that I got from looking up the numbers on this, just to give you an idea how different the movie business was back then. So this made 19 million worldwide. It played in theaters for 38 weeks.
Wow.
Think about that. A movie today that made $19 million, it worldwide would probably be in the theaters for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Unless it had a budget of, $1 million or something. But
well, I was talking with I can't honestly remember, having a senior moment. I can't remember who I was talking with. We were talking about Star Wars and how old we were when Star Wars came out. And you and I living in Parkersburg, Star Wars came out in 79, if I remember correctly. Is that
77.
Right? 77.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when we saw it, I mean, you say, oh, that came out in 77. So I would have been 5 years old? Like I was older than that when I saw Star Wars. But of course, movies didn't release nationwide in every single theater simultaneously the same weekend. They opened in big markets, and then they sort of trickled outwards to capillary markets, depending on how well they did. So I don't remember when Star Wars got to Parkersburg, West Virginia, but it wasn't that year. It might honestly not have been till the following year or even the year after.
I know I remember seeing it. I have kind of a vivid memory of it's had to have been one of the first movies that I saw in the movie theater. But I have a vivid memory of being there in the theater. But my parents have said, that they've told me, they said, we didn't see that like the week it came out. They said it was months later,
right,
that we actually went to see it.
Well, I remember E.T. I don't remember the specific. I remember E.T. being at the theaters in Parkersburg. In my mind, it was like for something like a year and a half.
Sure, it might have been.
It ran for a long, long time.
And they would bring movies back too. I mean, I know they did that with the Star Wars movies, where like the next summer or a couple summers later, they would just bring them back. Because there wasn't, home video, or it wasn't, super widely available or anything. So,
right.
A couple other things back to Nighthawks here for a minute. One criticism that I had of it is I thought the music was bad. I don't know if you felt that way or not, but it was just this really bombastic, like jazzy music with a lot of horns and stuff. And I felt like there were times where there was just no music, and it seemed more suspenseful in those scenes. I don't know. I thought the music was kind of hurt it.
I mean, I thought it was all over the place. I thought
Yeah.
that it was like the directing. It was, the idea that it was more than one person making those decisions makes a lot of sense to me
Yeah.
because, I like the nightclub scene. They actually have a bit of that in the trailer where it's this sort of driving post-disco, beat, but the lighting in that, the shots are all lined up so great. The music is this pulsing because it's this nightclub full of people, and we've established that the Stallone character, he's explicitly told, you're going to come face to face with this guy eventually, and you're going to get one shot at him. Once he makes you, he's going to find out everything about you, and you're not going to get a second shot. He won't hesitate to blow you away in a crowded place. And Stallone's like, I can't, if it's not a clean shot, I can't take the shot. And the guy keeps saying, you don't understand how this guy's mind works. And so sure enough, we find ourselves in that situation when they finally track him down. It's in the middle of a very busy New York nightclub, and their eyes lock, and Rutger Hauer makes him, and he has an opportunity and can't do it because it goes against his instincts as a cop. Like, I wish we got more into the character and his experiences in the war and why he's gun shy, but we don't. But I still think it's one of the strongest. I remember sort of sitting up in that scene and being like, oh, well, now, somebody's driving all of a sudden. And I thought that music was really effective.
Oh, yeah,
but
I
the
agree.
ambient, but in that sequence. But then, and there were other sequences. I'm like, what's this?
Yeah,
It's
some
kinda
of
all over
that
the
music was pretty. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's good things in this. It's well shot, and like I say, overall, I thought it was pretty good. I find myself, I don't know if it's just getting older or what, but it's interesting, and we've talked about this on all other episodes, but it's interesting to watch movies from the late 70s and early 80s. I think just to see how different they are from today's movies, because it's, I almost feel like, I love the superhero movies and all that kind of stuff, but some of the action almost gets to be kind of like white noise. You know what I mean? Whereas you go back and just watch these movies and it's just very simple. There's some action in it and some suspense, but this is a pretty small movie. And I kind of like that from time to time.
I say this as a compliment, although this is definitely not the French Connection. But there was a couple of times when I thought, oh, they're trying to fit into the genre slot of the French Connection,
right?
Where it's not an expensive movie to make. It's just character work and cops, and you're gonna have some gunshots and some squibs, but a car chase or two. But there's no robots turning into cars or spaceships warping through time and space. Right? It's just a cop, trying to like catch some drug dealers.
Yeah,
but it's a hell of a movie. It's slow until suddenly it's not. Like it's this coiling tension that suddenly the spring suddenly goes bam right at the end. But it's a hell of a movie. So we're kind of out of time, but I'm hearing you say you would recommend it.
I would, yeah. Would you want to, if you have time, would you want to do a spoiler alert and just talk about the ending real quick?
Yeah, let's do that. I
Okay.
also so for those who haven't seen it, I would also recommend it. It's on Netflix. It's not a big time investment, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that we've been talking about. And now, spoiler alert,
especially if you're a fan of these actors, which most people are. There's at least one of these guys you really like, if not all three of them.
Sure.
So
now we're gonna spoil the ending. If you don't want to listen to it, turn it off. Okay, go.
So they set up the trope of, Lindsay Wagner, who was the Bionic Woman, is is Stallone's ex-wife, and again, she could have been fleshed out more. I mean, they have a couple of board. Yeah,
that's true across the board.
Because she's, the whole movie is like that. But she's a really good actor, and but they, it's like Stallone's kind of trying to get back together with her, maybe, but she's
Right.
reluctant and everything. So they set up the trope that we've seen a million times of the love interest is going to die. So there's a scene where Stallone, he makes the realization, he doesn't say it, but you're like, he's figured out that Rutger Hauer is going to go and kill her. So he's calling her, to warn her or whatever. And so you tell the rest.
Okay. So then we follow Rutger Hauer, and this is so by the numbers. It's just paint by the numbers here. He is breaking into her house. It's a classic version of this scene. He jimmies the lock. There's a chain. He manages to quietly break the chain. She's in the kitchen. We see her, making some dinner in the kitchen. She's alone, lives in a nice brownstone. He slips in. He's clearly gonna, kill her, maybe capture her to torment Stallone first. But as we get into the kitchen, as he just about to have the reveal, do you want to do it?
So he goes to stab her, and then she has her back turned, and he goes to stab her, and she spins around, and it's Stallone.
It's Stallone.
And that hooked me until like the last couple of seconds when they showed him.
So funny,
right? Because I noticed I was like, okay, that's not her because that looks bigger. That's too big to be her, right?
And the beard. She doesn't have a beard.
Well, yes, the beard. But from the back, it was like, oh, it's too big, Did you laugh out loud at that scene?
I did, because I mean, you see at a certain point, you just think it's that end scene of the 80s, whatever, and Stallone will like, maybe she'll whip around because Stallone's gotten through to her and she's got a knife or something. Maybe, you hear the gunshot and then we slow reveal Rutger Hauer's got a hole in his chest and Stallone has made it there in time. One of the basic flavors. But then there's a moment where you go, oh no, it's him. And sure, there he is.
I thought that was great. I thought it was a great, and the funny thing is,
but the trope is so ridiculous. It's like this is how he gets the bad guys. He dresses up as a woman.
And I guess they telegraphed that from the beginning, right? From the opening scene,
Exactly. They establish it. There's one thing this movie does well, is it calls its shot and then it delivers, right?
Yeah.
It points to where it's going to hit the ball and then it hits the ball there. And you can't fault it for that.
No. Like I say, it hooked me. The funny thing is there's a movie that Stallone did in the early 2000s, and this is another one, if you haven't seen it, we could watch sometime, called ICU, and it's ISEEU, and they do that exact trope in the beginning of the movie. There's a serial killer and Stallone's a cop, and the serial killer goes to his house and kills his wife. And then like Stallone becomes like, he leaves the force and he becomes a drunk and all this stuff. And the movie goes on from there. So I thought, oh, this is going to be another movie that he was in where his wife gets killed. But yeah, I thought it was really fun how they turned that.
That was pretty common in the movies with violence too. I feel like you needed to give your protagonist a reason to like, for revenge. You needed to give him a bloodlust of some kind. And that in the 70s and 80s, the movies that really left a mark on me were, where they linger on the victimization, the setup of that. And you're just like, oh my God, and as an audience member, then I was like, kill them all, make it hurt, for the horror, for the evil that they've done in the world that I sat through in excruciating detail,
Yeah. Oh, sure. Funny thing with this, again, this is another one of these where, to me, movies were so much different back then. He kills him, and like Rutger Hauer, like there's this dramatic thing that was pretty over the top, where he falls through the door and everything, and down the steps of the brownstone and everything. But Stallone just walks out and sits on the steps and roll credits. It's not, again, a movie.
Yeah,
a movie today
over.
wouldn't. Yeah, movie today, there would be another scene with him and Billy D. Williams or whatever, what they did but that's just the end of the movie,
It's da, da,
Yeah.
da, 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 da. You're like, oh, did you run out of film or what
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, I don't, but that seemed to be kind of common. But I liked this ending. I thought, it was kind of corny, but it was fun.
It's worth
So,
a watch, especially
yeah,
if
I
you've got,
definitely think so.
if you've got someone you're quarantining with, or after this is all over, you got friends, you want to sit around and have some. It's it's
Especially
interesting.
that for now it's on Netflix. I don't know
Yes.
where it'll go after this, but
I actually, when I was looking around for the trailer clip, it looked like the whole movie's on YouTube. So
okay.
I think it's out there. I don't know
Interesting.
that anybody is jealously guarding this
I
property.
don't think anybody's really clamoring for this, but it's weird with the streaming services how stuff comes and goes. I don't really know why a movie like this would leave. I don't know where it's going to go, but anyway. But yeah, I recommend it. I thought it was. I'm glad I finally saw it after all these years. It's not an incredible movie, but it's worth watching.
Yeah, I agree. Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to end the podcast now. Thank you all so much for joining us again. And we look forward to sharing our next movie with you next time.